Hi guys, I'm Win Perini from MeasureBit, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to fix a brand new error with Facebook CAPI when running through Google Tag Manager. Now today's date is the 17th of November, and people have suddenly started noticing that their system that's been running perfectly up until a few weeks ago is suddenly starting to give them warnings about duplicate Facebook CAPI events. Now if that's you, this is likely to be the issue, and I'm going to show you how to fix that today. Okay, the setup that you see here is a Google Tag Manager browser setup, and we also have a Google Tag Manager server setup. So if you're running Facebook CAPI is a server-side data streaming service going from your server to Facebook's server. You might be running it in the browser. If you're doing that, I recommend that you stop doing that and that you set up a separate GTM server setup like you see here. And the reason for that is because it really just defeats the purpose of running a purely browser side implementation, because you're likely losing data, and so it just defeats the purpose of setting that up. Okay, so assuming that you're running both the browser and the GTM server concurrently, then the next step is to check how you're sending the Facebook CAPI test event code. Now, one of the things that's happened, and I first noticed this about 3 weeks ago, was that even though our system has been working flawlessly for several months now, and also on many different client account setups, it's been running flawlessly, all of a sudden we found them all having this problem where Facebook was telling us that we were getting duplicate events. And the way that Facebook knows that it's got an identical event, or looking at different versions of it, is it uses the event ID parameter, which is a unique parameter. So anything that Facebook collects within a 5-minute period, within a 5-minute window, if it sees any conversions, whether they're multiple conversions from the browser or multiple conversions from the server, it says, oh look, here's the same event ID. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take all of those events, whether it's 2 or more, it could be 100 events. Facebook API doesn't care, so it takes them all, it collects them together, and it gets all the redundant information, chucks it out, and takes all the unique information and joins it all together in what's known as a data object. And now that becomes the single event with all the different event parameters that Facebook uses to report on the conversions for your ads and for your analytics. Okay, so having said that, the one thing that changed in the last 3 weeks that we ended up figuring out, and I haven't found this anywhere, is that either Facebook or Google Tag Manager changed something on the back end, right? So if you're suddenly facing this issue, and you've changed nothing in your setup, it's likely that either Facebook or Google, and I'm picking on Facebook because Facebook's been making a lot of mistakes recently. I suspect what happened was maybe it was a junior coder, or maybe somebody in the organization went in there and they made a change to their API on their end. And what happened was, initially you could, I'm going to show you my test event code here. Initially what you could do is simply send the test event code like this. So when you go into your Facebook events console, I'll do that now, you would end up on this screen. So this is the event, the events for your Facebook ads. And you'd see this test event code here. It always starts with test, T-E-S-T, capital, and then some number behind it. And this changes obviously every day, and so you got to always get a fresh copy of this, and then you put that value in there. Now when you weren't doing any testing, what we would do in our setups is we'd put the words null, because you can't put nothing in there. If I try to put nothing into this box, what happens is I'll get an error. So I'll show you that. This value cannot be empty, right? So you always put something in there, and a lot of people put undefined or null, and either way this used to suffice with the tag setup. Now what's happened is, like I said, the change that happened on Facebook's end, now they've changed it to say, okay, if it says anything, even if it says null, now we're going to reject your query, and we're going to regard that as a test event, meaning that now it's not deduplicating your events, and you're going to get this error, and it's actually giving you the wrong feedback. Okay, so how do you fix this? Well, instead of giving Facebook a test event code, the way that we do it is to change this from being a constant to being something else. And so there's a new, oh, before I do that, there's something else I need to do. So what we need to do is to configure this container so that it tells us whether or not we're in debugging mode. And the way to do that is to open up this configuration. So you go to built-in variables, click on the configure button, and what we're looking for is debug, right? So there's a whole lot of different possibilities there. You click on debug mode, enable that, and now you have the capability of being able to tell whether or not your container is in debug mode or not. And I'll show you that in just a moment. So now we set up our test event code. Now we can change this. We can change it from being a constant to being something else. So now what we're looking for is lookup. So we put in lookup table in here, and what we're going to use is this built-in variable called debug. So once again, I'm going to search for that, debug. And there it is. Now I'm going to add a row, lowercase, true, and now I can put in anything I want in there. So this could be test 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to set a default value for when there is no test code. So when there is, so only in debug, if what this container says is it says check the debug mode. If it happens to be true, that is, if you are debugging your Google Tag Manager container, only then look for this, whatever you put in there. It doesn't matter what you put in there, as long as it corresponds with something that you're getting out of your testing console and Facebook ads. Otherwise, if it's not in testing mode, then simply return nothing, and literally nothing. So this is the true null being nothing, not even an empty space, right? So we click save, and now we have, what will happen is, I'll show you this in testing so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, but first let's grab that test event code, and let's go back to our container and put in our test event code. And I'll show you in a second where how to dynamically insert this test event code into your Facebook CAPI template. It's very simple. Okay, so we paste that code in here, make sure that we've got a relevant one, which is great. Save, and now I'm going to go back up to preview. Connect to my store, to my test store, and give it a moment to load up. And you see the feedback here that tells us that the tag has loaded. I'm just going to move my face over so you can see that. Okay. Alright, so we go back to our console here, and we see all the tags that are fired, which is great. But if I go to variables and I click on container loaded, these are all the variables that have loaded. Now if we go down to debug, okay, there we go. There's the value true, right? Debug mode true. And there's our other value. Where is it? The FB test event code. So there's my test code. All right, so that is now sending the right feedback to Facebook. So I'm going to show you how we do it in our setup so you can understand this. So we follow, there's a guy called CMO Ahava. If you've never heard of him, he is considered to be the authority on Google Tag Manager setup. So we've learned a lot from studying CMO stuff, but we've also innovated our own stuff as well. So I give credit to CMO for this. So what we use is Google Analytics 4, which is the new Google Analytics, and we use this transport mechanism. That's actually old. This needs to change now. And the way we do it now is this way. So I'm just going to take out this parameter. So we send our data to our server container, our GTM server container, and we also have that as a variable. And then it passes through this data. So we've got FB click ID, the FB browser ID. We have the unique event ID to tie the browser and the server events together. And we have the test event code that we're sending through to the server side to pick up on that side. All right, so let's publish that. Well, we'll preview that. We'll leave that alone for a moment. And let's also put our server into preview mode. Preview. And let's put our browser back into preview mode. It always helps if you do the server first and the browser last. So now we're going to do the browser. Preview. Once again, it's going to load up the test shop that we've got going. All right. So with any luck, it's going to send off an event, container loaded, and we're going to see the same feedback here. Right, so we can see for our Google Analytics 4 client, we've now got a CAPI request. I won't bother going into the setup for the container. You can look through our other videos on that and how we do it. But you can see here the outgoing request. So let's have a look at this. And now you can see this test event code, right? And this is happening because it's in test mode, right? So now if I do the same thing, and hold on, before I do that, I want to check that I'm getting a page view here. So I am getting that page view. So theoretically now, what I want to see is that when we're not in test mode, that is the debugging screens are shut down, and this feedback here that you see, this tag assistant connected, I want that gone. So if we now shut down our preview screen, so I'm going to shut down this preview, which is the server, and I'm going to shut down this tag assistant for the browser, and I'm going to shut down my test shop. Now this time I want to see what happens when I do shop test and load the screen again. What happens? Alright, so we get our page view. I'm just going to pause the video for a moment, for maybe 10 or 20 seconds, and see if that server request comes up. Now if it doesn't come up, then we're good. And we're good. So I paused that for about a minute and I confirmed that we aren't getting a server request for the page view, so that's great. Let's carry on testing that and just see if we get anything for the catalog and for the view item and for the add to cart. And once again, I'm going to pause my video and allow this time to send through a server request if there are indeed any. And after pausing it for about a minute, you can see once again that we're only getting these browser requests. Now if we were getting server requests, we would be getting this kind of thing where you see that the system has deduplicated the events and joined them together into one data object. And we're only seeing browser events. And you can see this is happening over 10:55, 10:57, so over a 3.5 minute period where we're not getting any server events, which is great. Now, normally I'd be concerned if I wasn't getting server events, right? But what my new variable has confirmed is that I'm getting no data sent through because of that lookup table that we set up, and only in testing view are we going to be getting that feedback in here. All right, now it's stripping that out when we're not in testing mode, which is what you want to see here. I know this is kind of gobbledygook, backward thinking, but in short, what you don't want to see is when all of your preview modes are turned off, you don't want to see any server-side feedback showing, or any server-side, activity, any server-side activity showing in this event testing screen here. Now you're always going to see events from the browser side when you're in the same browser. Now, if you went incognito, or if you were to use a completely different browser like Firefox or Microsoft Edge, and you're testing across different browsers where the cookies aren't necessarily aware of each other, then you're not going to get this activity. It's only showing you this because you are personally logged into this browser, and it can detect your cookies across this screen and across the other screen that you're in through the Facebook pixel. Right, so I just want to point that out. You're not going to see other people's feedback or their activity here in their browsers. It's only you see that because you're in the same browser context. Okay, so we confirmed that that's all working. We now know that that tag is stripping out the data like it should. We're not getting any erroneous feedback happening, and I'll close that down. But as we saw in the FB CAPI, if you rewind this video back to where I was showing you the feedback from the server side, where we were sending a request to Facebook CAPI, you saw that it added that parameter test_event_code. That parameter now has been completely stripped out because there is no data to send through. Okay, and that parameter happens to be what was causing this weird duplicate event error that was showing up in the Facebook ad terminal when looking at in this overview screen. You're not going to get a lot here because this is my testing account for my Shopify test store, but people were seeing this error suddenly show up here. So hopefully that was helpful, and if it was, please leave a like. It helps others like you who are struggling with their tracking and analytics and trying to sort this stuff all out. Now, I will say though that if you are having ongoing issues with Facebook CAPI and you've been seeing this warning for more than a month, and maybe you've been seeing this for months on end, it's highly likely that it's something else. It's maybe a misconfigured container, a misconfigured tag, and we see this kind of stuff all the time. And one place that we're seeing this a lot is with Shopify. For some odd reason, the native integration of Facebook with Shopify is giving people these ongoing errors. It's giving people bogus data, and we have a lot of Shopify people coming to us to solve this issue. And the way we do it is to set up GTM server and GTM browser on Shopify. And there's a couple of ways we do that. We do that for people with Shopify Plus, and we also do that for people without Shopify Plus. And there's slightly different configurations. Anyway, if you're interested in talking about your project, whether you're running Shopify or not, you have ongoing issues with Facebook CAPI or just tracking in general, feel free to click on the link in the description below to go to measurebit.com. There you'll see a button to book a free call with us to discuss your project.